Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of Good Writing. I'm Dakota Shane, and today I'm excited because we're going to dive into our first song on the channel. And today it will be Pink Skies by Zach Bryan. So, don't know if you know Zach Bryan or are familiar with his work. I'm just now catching on. I'm really late to the party, which I think actually kind of helps me provide a more objective perspective on things. But for those who don't know, he's from Oklahoma. He's a country, folk, raw, bluegrassy type singer-songwriter who served in the Navy for a while, and now he's just all over the place, all over Spotify, all over, I think, the radio. I don't listen to the radio too much anymore, but anyway, there's a few reasons why I think writers of all ilks, all places and spaces can learn a lot from singer-songwriters and songwriters. They're so confined in ways. They have to tell stories that toe so many different lines. They have to not be cliche, but also be relatable. Their medium is time-bound, literally down to the bar, down to the measure, down to everything. It's time bound, but has to be extensive and deep and say something. It can't be overly wordy, but it can't be too abstract, right? So I think the songwriters that do a great job, all writers can learn from, particularly if you're a poet. But anyway, I'll stop rambling. I think that kind of covers it and everything. So right now, I encourage you, I'll drop the link in the description, to listen to Pink Skies by Zach Bryan. If you're familiar with the song, it's like making the TikTok rounds all over right now, but feel free, click that link and listen to the song for a second. I think it'll help set the table for the conversation a bit. All right, so the first thing that stuck out to me on this song that I think is such a powerful writing principle is the misdirection and the matter-of-fact nature of that first line. A lot of times we tend to, in songs, in different genres, we have a tendency to, lead up. It's got to set the table and then build to the climax, right? That's what we're accustomed to. There's something really powerful if you do it in just enough doses to being matter-of-fact and breaking the mold. And right here, the fact that Zach just all of a sudden goes straight to the gut of just like, the kids are in town for a funeral. That line, just immediately you're hooked because it's not what you're expecting. It's the misdirection. It's a powerful tool that can be easily overdone and can almost turn cliche in a way. But I think this goes back to what the best songwriters bring to the table, which is this really refined sense and taste of when to say what. And in the context of where the space is entirely, their whole industry, the state of music, what is becoming overdone and all of that. So I think that that's a principle that really is powerful. And it's, I write mostly short fiction, so I make this principle like quite a bit. You have to start with a really strong opening hook, but can't be too clickbaity, otherwise this will turn readers, listeners, viewers off. So I really love that principle. Another piece here that I think is really important and really poignant for any sort of writing is this is such a great example of second, third, fourth, fifth drafts. As soon as you think that a line, that a sentence, that a story is complete, sometimes we'll just have those shoots of inspiration, right? We'll just like get hit by the muse, kissed by the muse, and then boom, it's done. I know famously, I think Paul Simon from Simon and Garfunkel, who knows if it's apocryphal or not, but apparently he wrote Sound of Silence in the bathroom in the dark in like 10 minutes or something. I might be getting that mixed up. But anyway, sometimes there's that, right? But a lot of times, most of the time, you really have to take it upon yourself to take the line a step further? How can we elevate? And what do I mean by that? So this line that rings throughout and is the namesake of the track could have been fine as it is. And this is what I mean. So I'll just read it from the top. The kids are in town for a funeral, so pack the car and dry your eyes. I know they got plenty of young blood left in them and plenty nights under pink skies. Doesn't that sound pretty nice? Doesn't that sound like a B plus or an A minus? But it doesn't stop there. The line that he says right after that is, and plenty nights under pink skies you taught him to enjoy. Isn't that just beautiful? Like, just one more line. Sometimes your work just needs that one last line. So it's important. There's a principle that Stephen King talks about, but people have talked about it since the dawn of time, so I don't have to explain it. But it's how after he's done with a draft, he puts it into his cabinet, his cupboard, his desk, and doesn't touch it. I think he said for 4 to 6 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. I'll link the book in the description. It's a pretty popular one, but it's called On Writing by Stephen King. But that principle of really having sober eyes, having fresh eyes on a piece of work will enable you to add that extra line like Zach did right here. And if he thought of this like on the fly, like if first time, more power to him. But as a writer and as, you know, someone who's been surrounded by writers my whole life, I would venture to bet he had that on the second pass, or maybe he was writing with a buddy and they were like, oh no, how about this, that you taught him to enjoy? Or, you know, I could be wrong and that's the whole shtick of the song. Although, as you know, that you listen to it, it's about a very memorable, visceral event like a funeral. So I imagine that it started with that. Anyway, so take that as you will, but I just think that under pink skies you taught him to enjoy. It's just so pretty, isn't it? Okay, so the next principle here that I think Zach does a great job of is from the beginning of our writing careers and everything, there's a principle that gets thrown around a lot, but a lot of times people still struggle with it late into their careers. I still find myself when I'm reading the first drafts of my pieces that like, holy shit, I'm describing way too much. And what I mean here is letting the actions of characters speak for the characters rather than you, the narrator, or them telling people how they feel or who they are. People's actions should dictate and tell you the type of person that they are. So I think Zach just does such a brilliant job here without straying into cliche or of describing what type of person this person was. And I don't know the background of the song. I don't know if this was a father, grandfather, grandmother, grandma, mom, dad, cousin. I don't know. But the actions that he talks about here are just, I feel like I know the person. Saving the kid from the water. Let me pull that up. So yeah, here it is. On that kid out on the river, you bailed him out. Never said a thing about Jesus or the way he's living. That's just little things like that. The actions, pulling a kid up from water, not criticizing who he is, not saying like you need to pray more and everything, which, you know, is fine if that's your thing. But that right there, and then also this line lets me know who this person is too. If you could see him now, you'd be proud, but you'd think they's yuppies. Don't you know him more, whoever this person is, that they're loving, they're so caring, but I can almost feel that they're terse, that they're almost callous in a way, that this person has a seemingly rough exterior, but is a gentle giant or just a gentle down home type person. And I think we all know people like this. At least, like, I don't know how it is elsewhere in the world, but like if you grew up in like a smaller town or, you know, any sort of rural area or even outside of that. I mean, people are people all over the place, but I can feel that this is a small town grandpa who I just know already. Yeah, and then this line, the one that just, is really the mic drop of the song. I bet God heard you coming. That is just, already like using actions, using words, using events that are third party, that are not directly created from that actual person, really goes a long way here in this song. All right, so the next principle here that I wanted to discuss is the power of details, the power of specificity. So this is a principle that a lot of prose coaches, book coaches, writers across genres, even in comedy, we'll talk about quite a bit. But if you want to elevate a character description or a scene description, be as specific as you can with a lot of different elements. So, for instance, Zach here could have talked about how the house smelled like this person, that the house, he remembers sitting around the table for Thanksgiving. He remembers the door frame. But instead of that, he actually talks about how, I'll read the line, and don't you mention all the inches that are scraped on the door frame. We all know you tiptoed up to 4-1 back in '08. That just immediately snaps us back to childhood. This zaps us into the scene because he was ultra specific on the description of this person measuring their height and everything, and how you can see the scrapes and scribbles on the door frame going up to it when the person tiptoed. It just resonates so much more than a more stock standard type of description. Even talking about, hey, we used to measure ourselves on the door frame or any sort of thing like that. Instead of being ultra specific, he takes it a step further of how these people, the scribbles were scraped on the door frame with it. So it takes us right there. So if there are ways in your writing, if you're feeling a description fall flat, really dial in and think about, how can I make this more specific? Instead of talking about a bedroom, how about you talk about the bed frame? How about you talk about the drawer in the corner of the room, or the empty bookshelf, or the bookshelf with one book on it that is a really specific science book, so immediately you know how that type of person, what that type of person is. Instead of describing a cat, describe the cat hair, or talk about how there's what are those things, the lint rollers? Like if there's 3 or 4 empty lint rollers under someone's bed, isn't that a more powerful way to talk about it than say this person has a cat, for instance? So anyway, I hope this is hitting in a way. But the point here is, again, just going back to the specificity. And the last thing I'll talk about here, what I think really separates the incredible writers, the incredible songwriters, poets, movie directors, script writers from the good ones, the great from the good, is if you really want to test your skills as a writer, then start trying to describe a universal experience in a novel way. So what I mean by that is, how many songs, how many movies, how many pieces of literature, how many poems talk about a funeral? A ton, right? Like you could probably, if you really thought about it with that, there's the funeral, there's other universal experiences like birthdays and giving birth, a number of them. And the best writers can really find a unique angle that is theirs and only theirs. And I think that's something too to keep in mind. I'll link another video where I touch on this. It's a George Saunders video about the 400-pound CEO, which is one of my all-time favorite short stories, where he, I think, displays this really well too. But the best writers can find that angle in even the most universal, almost cliche experiences that you would think would be overdone or everything's been said with it, but they just find a way to tackle it head on and find a new way to describe it. All right, so I'm going to end here with an exercise that I think applies some of the principles loosely, you'll see, that we learned in this for folks who are interested. If not, feel free. I've timestamped everything. You don't have to, I'm not giving you homework, but I do like a more interactive approach here. So for those interested who want to have a prompt and exercise based on these principles, get out a sheet of paper, get out a notebook, get out a Google Doc, and write down a list of all the things that you think are universal human experiences. So, like we had just mentioned, funerals, birthdays, weddings, doesn't have to be your wedding, but I think we've all at least been to a wedding. For those who are religious, going to church, going to school, graduating high school for those who did, those who didn't. Write down a list of all of the universal human experiences, learning how to walk, learning how to drive, learning how to talk. Write down that list. And then after you have that list, I want you to randomly select one of those experiences and then list all the parts and components that accompany that experience. And I want you to get specific here. So if we're talking about school, write down notebooks, teachers, gym class, first period, school bell, everything, just almost stream of consciousness here. So continue to write that list and flesh it out. Third step here is I want you to pick a number between 1 and 3. Once you have your number, don't cheat. Okay, so here it is. If you picked 1, you have a song. Just remember that. I'll explain more in a second. If you pick 2, you have flash fiction or a mini story. And if you pick 3, you have a poem. So based on that, I want you to time yourself for 10 minutes and then write about that experience of that component of that experience. So it can be take any way you want, but I think a good example of this is the door frame as people are cleaning out the house for a funeral. You see how specific that is? But once you have that component, time yourself, have fun with it. But I think it could really, hopefully it inspires a great piece of art somewhere. All right, so that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Wherever you are, whoever you are, I hope your plate is full. I hope your heart is light. And I hope before we speak again that you get to get lost in some good writing. We'll talk soon.